One is, it's really nice to see our county administrator up here at the DS. Thank you. Nice seeing you back. The other thing is, last week we had a meeting and we had some technical difficulties. And it was kind of, we sat here, I think, for about a half an hour waiting for everything to kind of come online. In talking to Deb, she says the only things we have to really make sure by statute is that we have to have an agenda, we have to have a quorum, and we have to have a recorder of the meeting. So if it happens again, I think we will go ahead with the meeting instead of waiting a half an hour and having everybody here waiting a half an hour. So I want to apologize for that happening. Okay, we'll go right to the agenda. Number 1 is the proposed cannabis ordinance discussion with Chris Pence.
The only thing, Mr. Chair, could I comment on that?
Yes, you may.
The only thing is, you know, the way the world is now, there's a lot of people that want to engage with the county board and, you know, via either, we don't do, we do Microsoft Teams, but we don't do, what's the other one? Zoom. We don't do Zoom, but, so I guess I'm a little concerned that if we start and there's somebody that wants to engage in something that's on the agenda, that concerns me. But,
Well, it would concern me also, but how long do you want to wait?
well, I guess
I mean, a half an hour, 15 minutes, an hour?
We're going to do our best to make sure that we don't have those issues
Yeah.
in the future.
Right. So
I
that
I
was
see
just
some
my
head
concern.
nods from our IT staff out there to make sure.
Or December.
Then I don't have to worry about it.
You don't have a say.
Yeah, that's right. Then I don't have to worry about it. But that was my concern, is sitting here for half an hour with staff sitting here for half an hour, and we haven't, you know, got the meeting started. That was just my concern. And I understand yours because of the
well, I don't want
transparency
to
of
have
it.
to, I don't want to have to make a motion and override you.
No,
But,
well, we could do that if that comes to that time.
Yeah, well, I
Okay.
just want to make sure everybody that if they can't be here. Okay, all right, that's all my comment.
Oh, we made it to 9:02, so we're good yet. Thank you, Chris, for your patience.
All right, well, good morning. What we have before you today is an update based on some of our conversation we had at the last committee of the whole meeting to talk about the commercial cannabis use ordinance. Just want to be clear, I did note that I listed it as Article 17, the proposed location in the land use ordinance will be Article 15. That was just a typo on my part, but so the ordinance itself now is really lined up in a way that you look at it from a section on administration, which covers articles part 17 through 17.6 and excuse me, to 17.4. Then we get into the registration of the cannabis ordinance, which is section 17.2. And then we get down into the rest of it, which would be the actual section where we deal with how we want to handle that from a county standpoint of location. So really what I did is took the feedback that we received last month. We're just focusing on just the cannabis itself and not that low potency is not going to be something that we're focusing on here. And then the other piece too, just to be clear, was that I know if we can scroll down to Article 10, I think, which might be the next, we had talked about where do we want these uses to be within the county. I think we'd be let's go down to page 13. There we go. And so these are we're looking at, cultivation, manufacturing, retail, and wholesale. And I know at the meeting last month, we had talked about those just being permitted uses, and I've done some research and done some looking at what other counties are proposing, and they're proposing those to be, either conditional use permits or an interim use permit, so that at least the neighborhood gets notification of the proposed use, and that way people can come in and provide comment and feedback if they have any concerns or issues with that. And so that would be my recommendation, that we would, possibly, move from just a permitted use to a conditional use instead. I wasn't sure what the board felt on that, or if there was any concerns about using a conditional use permit process versus a straight permitted process.
Is the one thing that you're talking about then would be the notification?
Right.
There's no other impacts that you would see?
No, I don't believe so. And what this would allow the planning commission to do would be to have an opportunity to review the property and to place what they think are reasonable conditions on to potentially mitigate any, sort of impacts that might be, happening, depending. Because right now, the basic, what you have before you today is really putting these uses in the commercial parts of the county. And so it would not be something where we'd be seeing in the residential parts of the county. It wouldn't be, in the shoreline district and those. It would be just in those areas where we have commercial and commercial zoning. So, and I think having as a conditional use permit, while we're still at that commercial, there still is going to be, we notify everybody within a quarter mile for a conditional use permit. And so there are still folks that have residential uses that are in that area that I think would appreciate at least a notification to be able to come in and provide comment if they have any questions or concerns about the use.
So under the permitting process, we can't put conditions on it, but under the CUP, we can?
If we want to, with a permit process, we can put conditions on, but it has to be very clear in the ordinance what the conditions are. With the conditional use permit process, the planning commission has a little bit more flexibility to look at site-specific conditions to place on that versus just a more of a blanket ordinance that just kind of is a one-size-fits-all. A conditional use permit kind of lets you tailor it to each individual property, and that would be proposed for a conditional use permit for one of these cannabis uses.
Okay, question, Chris, would that mean that under conditional use, that would be a public hearing also?
Correct.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
There would be a public hearing before, it would go before the planning commission, board of adjustment. It wouldn't come to the county board. It would be before the planning commission and the board of adjustment, yes.
Okay.
So you're asking the county board whether or not that you want it to be just if you want it to be a conditional use permit or
Right.
or permitted. So can you give me an example of, and they all have to be in commercial property?
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
so what other businesses that are going to be in a commercial district or commercial property that you would require that they have a conditional use permit? Is there any other ones that you would?
Yeah, like commercial storage facilities, those businesses that when people want to build those larger pole-style buildings that we've seen coming up, particularly like on 371 over by like Hartley Lake, that development from a couple years ago, that would be a conditional use permit. Certain things like animal breeding would be a conditional use permit. Extractive use would be a conditional use permit in the commercial, light and heavy industrial. Let's see. A waste facility is something similar to like a transfer station for like solid waste would require that. An event center, hotel, motel, bed and breakfast, like a resort, business, commercial, retail. So there are definitely some uses that are in the commercial district that do require a conditional use permit.
But what would be like I've always said, I like examples of.
Right.
So what would be an example of why we would have to have a what kind of conditions would you put on it then if it's
Maybe
in commercial property, like?
Right, so maybe the board would feel that there would be a need to increase the buffering between, maybe it's a commercial piece of property, but it always has to end, commercial end somewhere to a residential piece. So
Right.
maybe they think, well, maybe we think there needs to be increased setbacks to this property line, or maybe there needs to be more buffering to this property line. Maybe there's concerns about lighting, and so they want to make sure there's a very clear condition on lighting so that we don't have light pollution causing to the neighboring properties. There could be concerns about odor and making sure that there's certain, because not every cannabis ordinance is going to have an odor problem, and so we don't want to put a blanket ordinance that says everybody has to have something in place for that, but certain uses will, and depending on its location, it could have a negative impact on, to neighboring properties and that. So it's those sorts of things that it's just more looking at it from a site-specific versus just having kind of a blanket set of rules that apply to every parcel. And I think it makes more sense to look at it from a conditional use permit standpoint so we can tailor that to that specific property. And I think, just having learned a little bit from the, that commercial storage building, process we've had in the past, that was a permitted use, and all of a sudden these buildings started popping up in the neighborhood, and people were wondering why they weren't notified about it. So I think just from the standpoint of letting the neighborhood know about these certain uses through that process, plus we mail a notice out, and it also gets published in the newspaper, so people have the opportunity to be aware of what's going on in their community as well.
I'm somebody that likes less red tape and less regulations. Do you feel like if it's a conditional use that it would be more red tape and more conditions, or more, I don't know if I'm saying conditions, but more regulation on that person? Or is it just giving the tools to the planning commission just in case site-specific?
Yep.
That they,
Well, I think it's a great question, because I think it comes at it, I think it's two sides of the same coin. One is that it gives the county flexibility to put conditions on place that are reasonable to mitigate any potential impacts to adjoining property owners. But it also gives the landowner some certainty, because once you get a conditional use permit, that is recorded on the deed of the property, and that transfers with the property down the road. So once you get a conditional use permit, that's a perpetual approval for that use on that property. And so it does, I personally feel that it gives certainty to the owner to know that I now have this conditional use permit in place, it's recorded on my deed, and I know what my conditions are, I know what I need to do to be in compliance with the county. I think it provides certainty. I think a lot of what we run into a lot of times is when people they'll call the office, let's say, and say, or we'll call somebody and say, I built a deck and somebody said I didn't need to get a permit for it. Well, who'd you talk to? I don't remember. I talked to somebody, and with this, it provides that, that regulatory certainty to know, I know now that I've got a permit, these are the conditions I have to follow, and if I do that, then I can operate my business legally, and I don't have to worry about down the road about any certain, opportunities where things might change or be modified. It provides that certainty, I think.
what do you think?
Mr. Chair, I think Stephanie has something.
Stephanie, yes, Stephanie.
Good morning,
Good morning.
Commissioners.
Online.
Yes.
So one thing I would note, in conjunction with what Chris is saying, is that the cannabis permits are not transferable. So if a new owner were to purchase one of those pieces of property, they would have to go through the process again. But when we're talking about other businesses, what Chris is talking about is
Right.
accurate. But I just wanted to clarify that with the cannabis, those permits that we approve are for that person or owner solely for that business.
Not for that property then, as Chris
Well,
was saying.
but that is a great segue into my next conversation I wanted to have, and so I appreciate that. Right now, all we have in our ordinance is a conditional use permit process, and with that, that is a perpetual, yes, sir.
Perpetual as long as it's continued use. If they stop using that for, what do we have in our ordinance? We
Nothing.
don't have anything in ours. So,
Nope.
so if it was a beautician shop and it was conditional use and the beautician is gone and closed for a year, they can,
Come
here
back
in the
and-
county, they can come back and do
Correct.
that. Okay, I'm
Right.
familiar with ones that where if it stops the use for a period of time.
Yep, our
then that
ordinance
use goes
doesn't,
in.
we don't
Your ordinance
limit
doesn't.
that, but what
Okay.
I would propose and would be to add a interim use permit to the ordinance, which would allow us then to put sunsets on certain applications like this, and to put timing on there, which you're not allowed to do with a conditional use permit. So that would be an area that I would like to propose, that we would amend the ordinance as well, would be to add that, and so that these then would become instead of being a conditional use permit, they would be an interim use permit, and they would only be for the person that purchased the property, that owns it at that time. And then when the next person would purchase the property, they want to continue running that business, they would have to come back in and reapply for that permit.
Is that only going to be for cannabis, or is that going to be for other businesses?
No, I
that-
think that would be for some other businesses we have, such as, things like extractive use, mining, gravel pits, that sort of a thing. I think the interim use permit would be the right vehicle for that component versus just a straight condition. I don't think we change everything to a conditional use permit, or from a conditional to an interim use permit, but I think there are certain uses that it really applies to.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Just a couple of things. If you remember, we talked about this before. Your authority with regard to regulation of cannabis is just this: time, place, manner. Basically, that's what you get the opportunity to weigh in on, versus OCM, or the Office of Cannabis Management, is the one who determines who gets the license and the permit. You get to decide where will it be, what are the hours of operation, what are the surrounding areas, or what are the things that we think this is compatible for it to be located in these types of locations. I think the conditional use process or the interim use process, as Chris is laying out, gives the Planning Commission, gives you as the county the most flexibility in making those determinations. And because it's not a necessarily one-size-fits-all, because we do have several different types of cannabis licenses, instead of saying, well, we can do a permitted use for a retail facility here, but we're going to do a conditional use for a manufacturing or a cultivation or whatever it might be. If you keep them as all being conditional use or interim use situations, you have the ability to highlight what's going to be the best option for the location where this is going to be recommended.
So a question, so if this board, this is kind of a hypothetical, so let's say this board was all as conservative as I am, and we all said, we don't like cannabis and we don't want any cannabis facilities in our community or in our county, we don't have no say in that?
You do not have a say in that. You have to allow at least one license for every 12,500 folks. If you do not put any type of regulation, if we don't adopt an ordinance or if we don't amend our land use ordinance to put some type of parameters around cannabis, there's no regulation that says where it could be. It could be opened up wherever it might want to be for whatever hours with whatever type of signage they would want. You don't get the authority to say yes or no to having it. You get the authority to say where will it be, how long will it be open, what's the time, place, and manner of operation that it can occur. But you do not have the authority to approve or deny applications.
It's really similar to like an adult use ordinance where we have to allow those adult uses, even if we don't want them in the county, we have to allow them somewhere. And so this is what this is trying to limit in scope to where we would want these uses to be allowed.
I guess I'm okay with the conditional use. I guess it kind of makes sense to me to be able to have the planning commission, because I think it's site specific. I mean, it just depends on where it's going to be. I mean, if there's a whole bunch of commercial buildings on either side, I don't think it really matters. Right. But if it's like right next to a residential neighborhood, it kind of reminds me of this stupid methadone clinic down here. There's houses a little ways away, but there's some scary people down there. I think there's some scary people down there, but I don't know how that ever got in our community. But I think the conditional use process makes sense to me, and I'll support that.
So just real quick from a timeline perspective, just where we might be heading down the path. I think the idea would be to come back to you in the October committee of the whole meeting with the ordinance tidied up a little bit and get everything put together. We'll have a couple other changes to the ordinance in addition to that, because there's a couple things we have to update because of the comp plan as far as consolidating commercial zoning into one district and our industrial into one district and eliminating like the residential 20, which is no longer a district any longer. The interim use permit we had talked about, those components. And then we would bring that back to you, make sure that that we're still got the ordinance that you were looking for. We'd then start our 30-day comment period at that point. Look to come back during that comment period, come back and give you an update in the November committee of the whole meeting, and then go to the Planning Commission for a public hearing in November. And then we come back to the county board for final review at that. My guess would probably be at that first or second meeting in November or in December. So we'd have it in place by January 1, which is the time frame that we need. So
Sounds good.
any other questions for me?
Any other questions from the board?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good
Morning.
morning.
How are you guys today?
Record
Great.
management systems.
Do you mind if I stand here? I need the clicker though, so.
Yeah.
Are you willing to? All right, thumbs up means move forward. Okay, thumbs down means I'm going to sit down. Okay. Commissioners, I'm here today to represent the Sheriff's Office and all of our partner PDs in bringing to you a brief overview of the RMS project that we've got going on at the Sheriff's Office. I would like to preface what I'm going to say by letting you know I've created a short PowerPoint to try to bring everybody up to speed, not just those of you that have bits and pieces of it, but also the individuals that are watching, so that we're all on the same page. If you could indulge me and let me get through the PowerPoint and save any questions that you have until the end, that would be really great. I have the entire steering committee here, so any one of us can answer any questions that you have at that point. I promise to keep it brief. The other thing to let you know of is last time we met at the Budget Committee meeting, I told you we were currently negotiating contracts. We are still in negotiations on those contracts, so we won't be talking about the financial piece today. We do have time scheduled for next month where we will come back to you and get into the nitty-gritty of how we expect to pay for the system, what we've got planned, what we've been able to pull together. We'll go through all of that in great detail. I'll work with the county administrator on where is the best time and place to have that conversation with you.
Can I interrupt you just one quick second?
You
Tina?
bet.
Just FYI, the budget that she's talking about is part of the 2024-2025 capital CIP plan that's already been reviewed and approved. So it's all within the scope. The budget, the negotiations, the planning that they're doing is within dollars that you have already budgeted, approved, and allocated for that purpose. So even though we're not talking about the dollars today, the dollars are there, they know what that parameter is, and it's within that scope of that process.
Thank you, Debbie. That's a very good point. I appreciate that. Are you guys good with what I've laid out? Okay.
I can't talk until you're done.
You can, but I might respectfully ask if you could hold that thought.
That'll be a
Is that
first.
okay, Paul? All right, so this is just going to be a brief overview, and Courtney, if you could move us forward. I just want to, and some of what I'm going to be saying is repeating what I told you at the last meeting, but I want to make sure everybody's on the same page. So when we talk about the RMS project, RMS stands for Records Management System. Within the RMS, there technically is a portion of it that is the RMS, but when we refer to it in this context, we're talking about the entire system. So we are talking about CAD, mobile. We're talking about our records, our civil and our jail records. This system interfaces with the state and by extension with the federal government also. And so it's a very, if you want to go forward, Courtney. In brief, it is the primary system that we use for the Crow Wing County Sheriff's Office and all 9 of our partnering PDs. It is a shared system that it represents the shared system that we have in place today, which is LETG, and we've had that since 2007. The project is not a surprise. It may be the first time some people have heard about this project, but it's been laying in wait for many, many years now. We've been on our existing system for over 17 years. And I think anybody that thinks about technology recognizes that's a long time not to have made a change, whether it's a change because of personal preference that you prefer a different software package or a change by necessity. We have managed to stay on the same system for 17 years. We've lasted through at least 3 different corporate buyouts, and each buyout causes some uncertainty as companies determine whether or not this is going to be the product that they're going to support or whether or not they're going to purchase it, table it, and then put pressure on you to go to one of their other systems. We have managed to continue to participate in conversations that have kept the existing system relevant. It is not being actively worked on to the extent it needs to be the system of the future, but it has continued to meet our needs to the best of what we've absolutely needed to have happen. Because each of those buyouts has had its challenges, we have had a placeholder on our CIPs at the Sheriff's Office for many, many years. You guys have seen it. We put it out there, we push it back, we push it back, we push it back. However, in 2023, the decision was made we couldn't really afford to push it back any further, and so we started the planning process. So what was that planning process? What did we do? Well, we held multiple workshops at the sheriff's office where we invited in end users and we invited in decision makers that were working with the system. The people that use the system rely on the system on a regular basis, and we worked through mornings and afternoons of trying to get some synergy around what is it that we have that's working really well, where is the system lacking, and then also do we agree, are we all on the same page that we need to move forward? Over the years, there's been conversation that this system that so-and-so is using is really great, or this system serves so-and-so really well, and so we had fractions of people wanting to go and pursue different vendors. We needed to have the synergy of agreeing that the best use of tax dollars was going to be to find a system that could serve all of us, and that we couldn't be pitting ourselves against each other. Right after we got that done, we also developed the steering committee. The steering committee concept was what we had in 2007 when we went with LETG. In 2007 is when we deployed, but for 2 years prior to that, we had a committee of people that got together on a regular basis and were defining that, testing systems, and making recommendations. We did that this time. And so once again, and I'm going to get it right this time, we actually have the sheriff, two of our chiefs, the chief of Brainerd and the chief of Baxter, our IT manager, and myself serve on that steering committee. By putting the steering committee in place, especially since 3 of us have experience with the prior transition back in the early 2000s, we felt we could get away with not using a consultant, and you guys have approved bills for multiple consultants over the years. You know they're not cheap, so we're once again trying to be good, fiscally responsible in regards to the money that you've given us. And then with the support of the county administrator, we began vendor demonstrations because we quickly learned early on, it's been so long since we went shopping for a system, we weren't even sure what technology was going to offer to us. And so we started inviting some of the people that had been pursuing us for years as far as getting our business. We invited them to come in. We saw 6 vendors. They came in each for a day each on site and showed us what their systems were capable of doing. Next one. In the meantime, we knew that funding was going to be necessary, so instead of pushing back our CIP funding, we requested funding for 24 and 25. You guys were kind enough to approve that funding, and we appreciate that support. After we knew what the vendors had provided or what technology was out there, we began drafting our RFP. We wanted to make sure that we followed all the official rules that we needed in order to award a contract like this. We published that RFP in the first quarter of 2024. Everyone on the steering committee reviewed all of the proposals that were sent back. There were 4 of them total that came back. We scored them independently, then we met together and discussed it. In the end, a company called 365 Labs is the one that prevailed. 365 Labs is a company out of New Orleans. It is new to Minnesota, and it is, in the words of one of my peers from the steering committee, basically head and shoulders above the rest. It's the Cadillac that we all wish that we could own, but we weren't exactly sure if we could afford. But some of the things that 365 has to offer is that it's an app-based solution, something new to us, to have all the different apps that you can choose from. They offer real-time updates on the case file information by utilizing the cell phones that officers are already creating in their pockets. It is built, has built-in system redundancy. One of the things these guys anticipate, excuse me, I'm going to get some water. One of the things that these guys anticipate is that they're operating off of 4 or 5 servers throughout the country. And so anytime they need to update the system, or anytime there's a tragedy, if there's a hurricane that comes through the southern part of the United States, everything flips to a different server, we will no longer experience any downtime in law enforcement. And from a law enforcement perspective, that is huge. I've talked to you guys in the past, many of you in the past, regarding the need for redundancy in law enforcement, that if we have a server room that goes out, we can't go down. We need to be able to respond. This system has that built in as part of the overall package. And then finally, one of our goals was to make sure that the things that we liked about our existing setup, that we weren't going backwards, that we weren't going to lose some of the functionality that we've had for the last 20 years. The system allows for all of the current functionality plus some additional functionality. Two that I chose to highlight is records management. Our existing system doesn't give us any way to purge records the way we need to. And then also expungements and sealing. You guys were just talking about cannabis. One of the things that Minnesota passed was the right to have records sealed or expunged in regards to prior cannabis violations. Right now, we're doing the best we can based on a system that doesn't have anything set up for that. In the future, it'll be a checkbox, something that we can do relatively easy. So costing this new system was the problem. Remember I said the first response was, well, it looks like that Cadillac we all wish we could own. Cadillacs have price tags. We want to make sure that we're being good stewards of the money, so we weren't exactly sure how we were going to be able to afford it. So we got into the nitty-gritty with the vendor. And we said, hey, you're our vendor of choice. We need to understand how your system works. We need to make sure that there are no surprises. So we started digging into all the different apps that are offered, trying to decide what was necessary, what was luxury, and where we need to land as far as the finances on it are concerned. I do have that information, and we will be 100% transparent with you before anything is a done deal. But one of the things that we were startled by when we started this was that SaaS arrangement. I think I mentioned that to you before. It's software as a service. We anticipated having to put a whole lot of money into the implementation of this and then having an annual fee that we would have to pay. The upfront cost on this system is not nearly as high as what we anticipated, but the SaaS, the annual subscription to the software, is significantly more than we anticipated. So we've had to, as a team, and with the help of the county administrator, adapt to the new way of billing. That's not new to the world, it's just new to us because we haven't shopped for software in this capacity for this much time. We also had to, as I mentioned, we had to make sure that we had the necessary components identified so that we didn't think that we had it all accounted for and then we were nickel and dimed later on down the road. We had to look at existing systems. Is there something that this new system's going to do for us that can replace other systems besides LETG? And so we've got a list of other systems that as those contracts expire, we would be able to remove those systems because we no longer need it for the purposes that it was purchased for. And then we had to, and this is what got everyone's attention the last time I was here, the cost sharing behind it. We needed to identify, it's not just the county in this, it's the county and 9 PDs. What is going to be the expectation on everyone's shoulder and everyone's budgets? Then finally, we had learned about, and I mentioned this briefly last time too, Sourcewell had some incredible opportunities regarding funding. And I know every time I say that, Paul, you look over at Steve and you guys have that moment. But we are super grateful for what Sourcewell has been able to put out there as a possibility. To be quite frank, had that funding not come through, 2024, 2025 might not be the right time for us. But because we were able to apply for those grants that each of the PDs are going to use to offset their annual expense, what was once something that was a dream is starting to become more of a reality. So where we are right now is that we're working on contracts. We have 2 different contracts that we need to be working together on as a team. First with the vendor, and I can share this with you because we have shared it with the vendor and they are aware of it. 50% discount was the minimum we were willing to accept for being first in state. Because they have not been in the state of Minnesota, they need a sponsor, so to speak, so that they can work with the BCA and get their system approved at the state level and then become marketable within the state. We told them we needed to have a minimum of a 50% discount to make that worth our while to do. We told them that we want a 10-year contract. For the length of the contract, that first-year discount applies, and so we wanted to capitalize that. We don't want to be back here in 3 years saying, oh, we screwed up, can we get a different system? So we wanted to have a 10-year contract in place that allowed for the discounts for that entire time. Throughout the length of the contract, we want to limit our annual increases. They had originally proposed, 5% and cost of, what was that terminology they used, Debbie? CPI? It was more than we were willing to do, so we pushed back on that and said, no, we're looking for it to be limited to 3% a year. Timeline for the implementation needs to be outlined. We know that they have a lot to do before it's even viable for us here in the state of Minnesota. We want that actually called out exactly when we can expect different milestones to be met. We do not want to be paying for the first year subscription rate until the system is actually viable for us to use. And we want to have penalties if they go beyond the date that we're expecting them to go live. And then the final thing that we asked for is we wanted to have 1 to 3 years prepaid, and that's what we need to discuss with you. The second contract that we need to work on are the contracts that we're going to have with each of the individual agencies. That's something we did with LETG. It was really basic back then because we were all new to it. It basically said we're going to charge you on an annual basis, and this is the amount we're going to charge you. And we need you to maintain your systems and keep them up. We're going to do the same type of contract with the individual municipalities, but we are going to ask them to commit to the 10-year agreement as well. If we're going to be committed as a county to a contract that lasts 10 years, we want to make sure the partners that are in it with us are also willing to commit for 10 years. So if we have a PD that decides that they no longer want to have a PD, the city at least knows that they've agreed to help carry this project through to whatever timeline we're at. Oh, one final thing on that last slide. We have been working with the county administrator. We will continue to work with the county administrator. The county attorney is aware of the project, and he will review and sign off on any contracts too before we bring them forward. So next steps, and this is the last part, and then I'm opening it up for questions. We're going to have ongoing discussion with you folks here at the county board. We'll keep you apprised of the status of negotiations. We want to have that sit down where we're around a table and we're just hashing through what we're planning on doing with the costing and the funding. And then we, of course, would like to get your input on the proposed agreements with our partnering agencies. Then once we have all that done, we've crossed our T's, dotted our I's, we'll look to execute the contracts with your permission. And then our implementation, the vendor has already told us that they anticipate needing 18 to 24 months to get up to speed so that they are qualified to be running and operating in the state of Minnesota. So we have a potential live date of January 2027. So the last slide is a big thank you for your time today, and then opening it up for questions. Again, I have Chief Jim Ekstead here, Chief Don Davis, the sheriff, and then Jason from IT. Any one of us are willing to answer any questions that you have in regards to the project.
So I have a question. So let's say Commissioner Hoag and myself and we're sitting over at Oak Lawn having their delicious chicken dinner on Wednesday.
Oh, cool.
And a couple of people come up and they say, gosh, you're going to spend $1 million on this. How do you explain to them why you need it, what it's going to do, what does it do? How do you explain, if I'm out and about, how do I explain it to these people of why we're spending that amount of money?
You want the elevator speech for it.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, what does it do? If I'm a deputy and I'm in an accident, do I have some kind of ability to just do my report verbally, and then it just gets uploaded into this system, or what is this?
The system starts the moment you call into 911. It's the system that the dispatchers are taking your information and entering the information into. It's giving them feedback regarding who's available to take that call, who are the appropriate parties that should be sent, and they're collecting the basic information. That information is flying out to the field, where those guys are responding to the call. You picked up your phone. They now, with this new system, and the guys will remember the details on the field side of it more than I will, but you can take that phone and you can take pictures of the accidents that are occurring and have that automatically feed into the reports that we need. Or you can't you scan the plates and have that automatically run the state returns for you instead of having to enter it in? They can now dictate on their phones with this system. They'll be able to dictate their notes on the phone and have that automatically feed into the case file information, which takes less time on their part to come back into the office and have to type up their reports. They'll still have to type up reports, but gathering that information will be so much easier for them than what we currently have today. Likewise, once they're done with their part, when it goes to records, and records is working with our prosecutors, they will have a simplified way of getting that information together and sent off to Don's office or off to the city prosecutors. The jail, with the booking side of it, gets to do everything that they do today, and then hopefully we'll have some additional features. And I apologize, I don't have them all. I have them all written down in a big binder back there. But basically, anytime you interface with us in any capacity at all, we're relying on this system to provide the best service possible to you.
Well, one other thing, I would just reiterate, and I think you're doing it on this, is it is so important, Sheriff and Chief Deputy, that you work with the county board, whether it's, whatever, I don't care what you're doing. We're in charge of your purse strings. I've said this before, if you want to sue us, I say go right ahead. I can explain it out in the country, but I'm just saying that I don't care what it is, if you're having another sheriff's station up in Emily or whatever it is, at least let us know what's going on. And I think in the past you've really done a good job, and I hope that continues, that you let us know what's going on so that we're not getting sued or anything that's happening. You know, does that make sense?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
That's why we're here today too, is to
Yep.
give you a 35,000-foot view.
Sure. Okay.
And just to reassure you, Paul, from the steering committee's point of view as far as this project was concerned, we never expected to do anything different. That was always part of the plan. That was why it got a little bit ahead when we were talking to the city councils, is because we recognize city councils also need to have that understanding of what the project is about and what it is that they're being asked to approve. We have no intention of blindsiding you, nor do we want to leave you out of the conversation. We value your input.
And just one other thing, I know this in my commissioner district, I don't think there's any concerns, but I know that I've talked to Commissioner Hoag, and Commissioner Hoag, Doug, you had a concern about the cost that it would cost for Deerwood, and because it's a tiny, tiny little town. I kind of question whether or not, if you go down to Florida, all these little towns, everybody doesn't have a police chief and a police department. It's all part of the sheriff's department, to me, which makes total sense. I know that'll upset some small little, like Cuyuna, what do they got, chief and how many people? I know that'll upset. I'm not going to be driving up there anytime soon, but I'm just saying that I just think trying to consolidate some of this stuff would save the taxpayers money. Down in, like Garrison, that's a city, Fort Ripley's a city, but they don't have a police chief or a police department. So we handle that, don't we? And they're not paying us. No. So same thing with Emily. Do they really need a police department up in Emily? I don't know. I don't think so.
So I'm just going to say this.
Anyway, I'm off the track.
No, that's
Sorry,
okay.
Tina.
That's okay. all the taxpayers are going to share in the expense of this, for sure. And that's one reason, I mean, I'm a taxpayer. I could easily flip around my hat and go from sheriff's office to Baxter resident, and I don't want to see my taxes go up any more than anybody else does, so I completely understand that. We are doing everything we can to be as fiscally responsible as we can in regards to this. When we bring the costing back to you, one of the things that you'll notice is there are certain parts of the expense that we are going to bear at the county level, because you're right, we're all citizens.
Right.
Everybody's getting the same service. There are things that are tied directly to whether or not that agency exists. And so, because we're committing to a contract that's going to acknowledge them as existing, then we want to make sure that they understand that this expense tied to this project is tied to your agency and the number of employees that you have at that agency, and that's how we've decided where to do that cost sharing. In regards to whether or not it's prohibitive or not, it is more than what the existing system is. However, two things to keep in mind. One, if any one of us went and tried to get a system by ourselves, it would be astronomical. So they're already saving money by being able to hop on the system we have. There's a huge, huge benefit for us all to be sharing information, and that is if Doug gets stopped in Cuyuna and he's given a warning, and then he gets stopped over in Cross Lake and he's given a warning, by the time he hits Baxter and Baxter says, hey, you've been warned twice now, we're not going to warn you anymore. Sharing that information helps us to be more efficient where we're at. So whether or not somebody should or shouldn't have a PD representing their jurisdiction is the decisions for them to make. We're just trying to be fiscally responsible in how do we work most efficiently together and do it at the least amount of money for the taxpayers.
Ina, how does it work with your state partners, I guess? How would it work with like the highway patrol, and are they have access to this too, or how does that
You know,
all-
they don't. When we went with LETG, ironically enough, Eric was the sheriff at that time, and Eric did invite them to come to the table and be part of that conversation. It was the first time we had even talked about doing a shared system. At that point in time, the state troopers decided to go a different direction and do their own thing. We haven't had conversations with them in regards to this system, but what we have had conversations on is that this system is so robust and capable of doing so many different things that it could bring in fires. So Chief Holmes over at Brainerd Fire Department has been participating in our meetings and is very interested, as has been Chip, and I'm sorry, I would probably hack his last name up.
Lohmiller.
Yeah, you guys all know. They've been participating. One of the things that the sheriff would like to see us accomplish, and the steering committee has on their radar, is that we first and foremost wanted to serve law enforcement and make sure that we didn't take on so much that it just grew out of control. But now that we've done that, we have a good handle on what we would need. We're looking to see, is there a possibility to dove in the fire departments? Is there a possibility to bring in other first responders so that all first responders, regardless of the discipline that they're representing, can utilize this same system instead of having their own separate systems?
So when Doug gets 2 warnings in Cross Lake and Cuyuna, then when he gets to the highway patrol, they won't know that he's had 2 warnings then?
Unfortunately, they won't. But we don't
Wow.
tell people those secrets.
You're off the hook?
For now.
Okay.
Earlier in the presentation, did you say there was 9 cities or 9 partners in this? And how, Emily, for example, that doesn't have a PD, are
Emily
they
is not counted.
It's not?
It is not counted.
So what are the 9, do we know what?
Brainerd, Baxter, Nisswa, Pequot, Breezy, Cross Lake, Cuyuna, Deerwood, Crosby.
Okay.
Would you like him to repeat that backwards?
So a city like, like Ironton, for example,
They're in with the Deerwood contract.
but they have no fiscal responsibility for using that system when they're on patrol in Ironton.
But
Jim, can you comment?
Jim Axted, Baxter PD. That kind of goes to what Tina was speaking to about the other contract as we move forward now. In the event that there's an agency that would fold in the next 10 years just because of downsizing. We're anticipating that at this point. So like, for example, Emily, I believe you still receive some public safety funding potentially from them. I'm not sure, but anyway, if a city is currently Ironton funding the city of Deerwood for police services, if all of that goes sideways in the next 10 years, what we hope to capture in that contract, the memorandum of understanding or agreement that we create with each of those 9 entities now, is what happens if they go away. So that funding source would be stable for the next 10 years for the county. I don't know if that's exactly where you were going, but
It is, I guess, I know the sheriff's visited a few cities and shared a ballpark, I believe. What is that based on it sounds like you're still negotiating some of the terms
the
of this?
cost for each entity.
Yeah, right. How do you determine that?
So, do you have it? Is it
I don't have it
slide?
with me.
If Tina can grab it, it's a formula that we came up with did we go with officers? Or did we use?
Give me just a second. What we did was we had the quote from the vendor, and there are certain parts of that quote that are per agency. There's certain parts that are per officer. There's certain parts that are per primary agency and then secondary agency. What I did was I created a spreadsheet that identified all of the tangibles that we knew were directly tied to that entity. Not the expenses that we would have if that entity wasn't around, but those expenses we only have because that entity is there. We summarize that, and that's what we presented to the chief of police for budget planning purposes, and that is what the sheriff has been going to meetings, talking to city councils about. We also, thanks to Chief Eckstead and thanks to Sourcewell, were able to find funding for them through the Sourcewell dollars, and each one of those entities applied for a grant that will give them $20,000 to offset their expense. And in most cases, that means agencies won't be going up much from what they did with LATG, and in a few cases, they'll be paying less.
Just a question, because of the size of the different agencies out there, is their cost then prorated? You talked about it being how many officers they have. Do they look at what population they serve when you're looking at the different departments and their cost?
The fees that were tied to the agency size, they did not, but the areas where they were tied to the number of officers that they had, they did. So we had to provide all that information to them as part of the RFP process and getting the grants. And we'll go into that in more detail. What he's referring to that I can go grab, I can't go grab it right here because I don't have it here, and I don't really want to get that granular with you today. We're already past our 15 minutes, but I did want to let you know that that'll be part of what you'll see when we actually break it down, how we got to the dollars that we got to and why.
And that's before the decisions are made?
Absolutely, absolutely. We don't have authority to sign these contracts until you guys okay it, so
Yeah.
you don't get to okay something blindsided. You have to see the details behind it.
I do have a couple questions, if you don't mind. You showed up there first in the state. You know, that kind of concerns me a little bit. If they're the first, that's the first time this software has been used in this state, that company?
It is, but they are throughout the United States and multiple other jurisdictions, and they have a really good reputation. The First in State is something that at first we weren't really excited about either, because quite honestly, when we went with LATG, we were one of the first in state with LATG. It was brand new software. They were still building it after we went live with it, and we know what's involved in that. So this software is fully built. They just have to build the interfaces with the state of Minnesota.
And the other thing that comes into, you know, if everything's up, everything's running, everything's working fine, everybody's happy, what is the backup if that system goes down? You know, I mean, if that system goes offline that we're going to be on, you know.
It doesn't go offline. That's what's so beautiful about it. Unless you're talking about if it goes out of business. Is that what you're talking about?
No, just goes offline. All of a sudden, we can't get into the server because it's a cloud system, as you're talking about.
Right.
So none of it's actually tangible right here.
Right. It will not go offline because they have multiple servers throughout the United States and they have backup plans. It rotates. I can call Jason up. He gets very excited about that. That's the one thing
he was
that
already
Jason is
excited
like
when I was
jumping
talking
on.
about it.
You know, and when you look at it big picture, even with our system being housed internally here, there's still a lot of variables to hit that system. You got to have an internet connection, you got to have firewalls, you have to have state of Minnesota traffic, and you have to be able to get into our buildings. Where this system, it's spread throughout the United States, and basically all those officers need is that internet connection in their squad car to hit their servers. There's a lot less, I guess, hoops to jump through to access their system than it is to access our existing
You
software.
feel good about it then?
I feel great about the
Okay,
software.
that's
Yep,
all I
it's,
need to know.
very redundant. It's spread out throughout the United States. It's basically, I had a checklist of items that were must-haves for me, and they met all my boxes, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
we'll do it on paper. That's the final answer, and that's what we've been doing for the last 17 years. On occasion, it does go down completely.
Yep.
We really believe there's a 99.9-something% chance that this won't, but to answer your first question, that's what we would do. We still have keys to get into the jail, we still have paper, that's
Okay.
how we would get by.
I just always look at the what if.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
The other feature that this vendor has built in is that if we do lose internet connection, everyone can continue to do what they're doing, and it uploads as soon as we reconnect. So they have a lot of safeguards built into it, and that is exciting for us, because nobody wants to go back to paper.
So in the the system we're using currently, there's a lot of data stored in that system currently, correct?
A ton, yes.
A ton. How does that data migrate over to this system, or does it?
We are still discussing that as an admin team. It's not part of the initial project because the conversion of data is a whole nother beast. You
Yeah.
not only have to have the existing vendor be willing to do it, which they have said they're willing, but you have to have, the new vendor is willing. You have to have the existing vendor, who we haven't even really started having conversations with yet about the exit strategy. But these guys need to be equally willing to let them into their software to identify where data is stored to convert it over. The sheriff is a huge proponent of wanting to convert data over. We have to make decisions regarding whether or not that's going to be fiscally responsible and whether or not we have the ability to bring it over and rely on it to the extent that we would like.
One question, if the data that's there is in that old system, whose data is it? Is
The
it?
data is always ours. The system that we use to access it is not. And
Okay.
so when we converted before, we had CIS, Brainerd had CIS, and we went to LATG. We did not have the ability at that point in time to convert the data in. We ended up having that data brought out and put into an Access database and became available to us to look up as needed. And then as we age out of that information, we're able to put that aside.
Okay. That's all I had.
So my final question, believe it or not, the most important question
Okay.
is, how much is Jenkins going to have to pay?
Jenkins?
Yeah.
Jenkins does not have a police department. We contract, the city of Jenkins, I do know, contracts with the city of Pequot. So if Pequot's online, then they will have to modify their contract, I'm
Meant to
sure.
be funny, sorry.
Oh, I didn't know. I thought that was an important question you needed answered.
That was meant to poke them, so.
So I'll work with the county administrator, we'll get on another meeting, and we'll figure out what's the best venue to be able to give you all those numbers and to let you peruse them at your leisure. So if you don't have any other questions, I thank you for your time and your ongoing support. We really do appreciate it.
Ina.
Thank you. A lot of work. Tom, are we going to talk about trees?
Yes, yes, we are. Good morning.
Good morning, sir.
Here today to talk about our 2025 harvest plan. So annually, Land Services comes here and talks about our harvest plan. Our harvest plan is a one-year plan that we derive from our forest resources plan, and it just talks about what we're going to harvest in the upcoming year. So for a little bit of background, our 2024 harvest plan is complete. In 2024, we set up 1,338 acres. Of that, about 30% of that is a thinning. And then for 2025, we're at 1,424 acres, and about 35% of that is a thinning. And so we come here, and annually we talk about this, and we provide a map for the commissioners as well to look. These are our proposed harvest areas. We say proposed because we do send staff out there to review these areas, ensure that our inventory is accurate, and then they prepare a detailed appraisal for the sale of the timber the following year in 2025. And so today, we're here today just to talk about this harvest plan, and pending any comments or questions we have today, we will come back next week and ask the county board to set a public hearing and post the proper notifications and talk about our harvest plan with the public. So,
Just a question, so Tom, how's the price of this product? Is it staying steady? Is it down? Is it up? Or, so that if we're looking at doing this, I mean, are we gonna have consistent revenue coming in, or do you know what the price is, or?
yeah, that is a good question. And so prices fluctuate sometimes daily, sometimes they monthly, depending on a lot of factors. Things are fairly consistent right now. I would say that if anything, it's a little bit of a dip, but historically we've been fairly steady with the revenues that we generate off our TF land. One of the things that we have strived for is a sustainable harvest year over year, year after year. One, to generate a consistent revenue for the county. Two, to provide those forest products to those loggers that work for and in Crow Wing County, and then for the mills as well. So, we're fairly confident that it's going to continue to stay steady, but sometimes we don't know. It really depends on the economy sometimes.
Tom, didn't we do something different last year in 2024, the way we bid that, put those out on bids?
Correct.
And we're going to do that same thing in 2025, I think, because I think you feel, I remember, if I remember hearing it right, that you felt we did better as far as the county that way, by the way we sent out the bids, or had people submit bids for the timber.
Yeah, so in the past, we used to do an oral auction where we'd invite everybody to come into the building. In 2024, we moved to a sealed bid, and it's not something we haven't done before. We did a sealed bid during COVID times. I think we did a little bit better, very comparable with an oral auction. It's a lot easier on staff. It gives an opportunity for the loggers to submit a bid, and they don't have to drive from wherever they are to come and meet that day. Maybe they have other obligations. They have a month to review the tract and then submit their bid to us, and then we open them at a later date. And our auction actually is next Friday, not this Friday, but the 27th. So we are soliciting for bids right now, and we'll see how this auction goes. But yes, to answer your question, 2025 will most likely stay the same.
I had a call from somebody that was in my district, and they were concerned about a cutting that was done. I think it was oak that was done, and they called me up. I don't know if it was in Doug's district. It was right on the border there. Sure. And they were concerned, and they had mentioned that, nobody sent us a letter, and I think you went through the homework and actually found that we had sent them a letter.
Yes, up in the Adney Lake area.
Yeah.
Correct, yep. So anytime that we do a timber harvest that adjoins another ownership, whether that's state, federal, tribal, private, we do send them a letter, with a map of the timber sale saying, hey, here's your property, details our process and how we establish our management lines, and then gives them an opportunity to comment to us about any concerns they have, or maybe any cultural resources or significant features that maybe we didn't find. But also, our public hearing is another opportunity for people to come in. We publish the map. They can come in and chat as well.
And remember the fact that the DNR also has property out there. They also go out and manage in our area. And I had a few phone calls lately from that in the district I serve, so. Yep. Okay. I didn't have any other questions or comments. Anybody else?
So if it's okay, we'll, next week on consent, we'll have hopefully an action to approve setting the public hearing date. And believe it or not, I think that date, if approved by the board, will be November 26th. So it's a little ways out there, but gives the county administrator's office time to get the posting completed and published in Land Services and the Brainerd Library for inspection. So,
Good.
Thank you.
thank you. Have a good day.
Thanks, Tom.
You can go up there.
Good morning.
Good morning. It looks like you're out of time. You've already gone past the clock.
What?
Thank you for giving us the time. We've been kind of hoping to come and speak to you a little bit about what's been going on with MnChoices and disability services. On our, I think on the agenda, it also mentioned adult protection. We were here last week to talk about our adult protection work, and the proclamation was signed at board. And so we are not planning to spend time today on adult protection unless you have specific questions of us. So good morning, Chair Lubke and fellow commissioners. Tammy Lewick, Adult Services Manager over at Community Services. I'd like to introduce Trish Eggstead. She's our Disability Services Supervisor, and she also supervises our social workers that are currently working in the jail. And then Morgan Althaus, and Morgan supervises the MnChoices assessors, the assessment team, adult protection, and then the 2 social workers that we have out in the community working alongside law enforcement. I also want to give notice to the staff we have behind us. I just want to let you know, as we walk through this today, I want you to hear that these are the people that are really helping us work through the challenges we've been facing with MnChoices and disability case management. So thank you guys for being here. So MnChoices assessment, I think you know, but our MnChoices assessment is the assessment that is done to assist in determining need and whether people meet criteria for waivered services. This can include PCA, which is going to be renamed, or is being renamed, CFSS, another acronym in our world. And then the waivered services for our under 65 population, as well as our over 65 long-term care waiver participants. And as I said, today we're going to just speak primarily to MnChoices assessment and disability services. Who's got the room? You go on, Courtney. So the next slide. So the impact points that we wanted to come and talk to you about today were some post-COVID requirements. So during COVID, we had the ability to complete our MnChoices assessments remotely. And following the public health emergency, or really it was last year, we needed to step back to doing face-to-face assessments again. And that has been obviously a change for us, going back to face-to-face in pretty much with all of our assessments. There are a few exceptions to that where we can do remote, but it's really based off of the person's choice. And all new assessments have to be done face-to-face. The new assessment tool. So DHS put forward a new assessment tool they call 2.0. It was supposed to be faster, and that is not what our team has been finding. First off, we're learning it, so that's been difficult. But the other thing, listening to the Sheriff's Office talk about programs, is the program that we moved to did not bring over any of the information. So we've had to front load all of the data on the people we've been providing assessments for out in the community.
Did they have an update of their software or something, or what?
We actually moved to a different software, and Morgan will talk a little bit more about that here shortly. Community First Services and Supports. This is launching in October of this year, and we are preparing for that. This is going to increase the number of people requiring, this isn't going to increase the number of people requiring assessments. What it will do is it will take our PCA assessments, and we have to touch the assessment more frequently than we've had to do in the past. So we're going to have to touch it a couple of times in this new process that's happening in October. Increasing individuals that are accessing the services. We've kind of been holding at 30 people seeking new assessments per month. That's tends to be our number, but our reassessments, because our case management assessments are going up, we have to do those reassessments annually for those that are on services. We are prioritizing those individuals who are on services because we have to prioritize in some way. And so we're trying to keep people that are on services, which then has created this new initial assessments. We have had a wait time now that we have never experienced before this year. Other counties across the state were facing this already last year, but we had been able to maintain our 20 days, which is the expectation of DHS. And what is out there in policy. So for the first time, we are now facing that. Morgan and Trish are going to walk us through the rest of our slides. They are obviously very close to this work, and they know a lot more than I do when it comes to explaining these things. So I'll let them take it from here.
Thank you, Tammy. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning, Morgan.
I think the words post-COVID stick out to everybody, and we've been hearing it over and over and over again, but I'm here to say it again. We are living in the post-COVID world with our MnChoices assessments and trying to transition back. A couple things that have really impacted us post-COVID is actually travel time. I think that's why there's that little car there, right? Like, we were doing some virtual assessments. We were allowed to do assessments between the years of 2020 and 2023 over the phone on a Teams call. There were certainly still individuals that were opting to do something face-to-face, but I would say a majority of our assessments were in that virtual environment, right? So we didn't have to travel. Our assessment team does cover the entire county of Crow Wing, so we cover any assessment that is requested in our jurisdiction. That means that we're going all the way up to Emily if somebody in Emily is wanting a face-to-face assessment in their home. That can add a lot of time for our assessors, and we're definitely feeling the impacts of that. The state did recognize that during COVID, when there was some flexibility with virtual assessments, that was helpful. However, we definitely still see the value and know there's value in doing things face-to-face. So the limitations for those virtual assessments are strict. They're really only for individuals that are being reassessed, so are already receiving service, already having kind of ongoing contact from case managers. Anything that's initial, brand new, somebody that has not been on services before, we're in that face-to-face. I think that's... I'm a big proponent of analogies, so here's my analogy for today. MnChoices 1.0, and this can be vice versa. So if you're an Apple fan and you were forced to go to an Android, or you're an Android fan and forced to go to Apple, you know that that's not a very comfortable transition, and there's definitely changes between the two of them. That's where we're sitting with MnChoices right now. So with MnChoices 1.0, our staff were familiar with it. We were working the camera, we were using the text messages, we were doing all the things on an Android phone, and it worked really well for us. And the state made a change to go to revised MnChoices. It's like upgrading to an Apple for an Android user. We can still use the camera, we can still text, but things look different, they function differently, and we're still working through the kinks of it. I am optimistic, and so I'm not going to say a rough transition, but it's been a challenging transition because of the changes that have came with the program. DHS is constantly evolving this new program. We're giving feedback. We're able to tell them, you know, this is working, this isn't working. We really need to see a change in here. But the changes that come with DHS are sometimes slow, not at the speed that we need them to be at, and we're going into revised whether we like it or not. So the 1.0 system sunsets September 30th, and we don't have access to it anymore. Tammy did mention that as a part of kind of transitioning into revised, we've been kind of through this transition through the last 2 years. We've had to take all of the people that were in that 1.0 and upload their data into the new system. Pieces of it have been able to transition smoothly, but a lot of it is legwork on our staff to copy and paste, figure out which section in 1.0 it should go into revised, and it's been time consuming. It's continually improving, like I said. We're finding our footing, obviously, because it's sunsetting. Our staff have been in the system for a full year now, so we're starting to see that light at the end of the tunnel, that the assessments we did last September, there's 3 or 4 or 5 that have everything uploaded, and it feels really good, but it definitely took us the full year to get there, and we're not fully there yet, so that's been very good.
And just to talk a little bit in regards to what Tammy shared about the new programming, Community First Services and Supports, is replacing PCA. It's the new analogy or acronym of CFSS. It is requiring us to do a couple extra steps. The steps you see in kind of the pinkish purple are the added steps for a lead agency, and so the newest addition is the consultation services. So it's a whole nother partner that has been developed by DHS to kind of play in this flow. And so we'll be communicating, we'll have additional people in this team to create CFSS supports for the individuals. And so it just kind of creates another loop, another additional piece of the work. We'll be touching the case more. PCA, we would do the assessment, complete the support plan, enter the service agreement, and that person was good for a year. This will be, we'll do the assessment, we'll refer to consultation services, a plan will be developed, it'll come back to us, we have to approve the plan, and then if hopefully everything's good to go, we approve the service span, and then we're good for that amount of time until the next reassessment. However, if they have a change in their plan, if there's anything that needs to be adjusted, it comes back to us. Again, then it has to go out to the consultation agency, it comes back to us, we have to approve, and then we have to enter again. So hopefully it's only a one-time touch, or I mean, one additional extra touch, but we know there'll be cases that we'll be doing a few extra touches on too. So it's just a new program. We're continuing to learn, I think, as the point of the state's continuing to learn through the process too. We're doing weekly trainings right now, and we have 2 weeks until it launches. So we'll continue to update you as we learn more on CFSS too.
One thing I just want to mention with CFSS is that when the state originally brought it forward, lead agencies weren't going to have the role, these extra steps that we currently are going to face. But CMS actually gave the direction that the program cannot launch without having lead agency involvement and lead agencies approving the plans. So at one point, we weren't going to have to face these purple boxes, but CMS really wanted our involvement and our level of approval within the service delivery. So.
And right now, PCA is state funded, whereas CFSS will be portion of state and federal funding, so there's some benefits there too, potentially. So that's just the guidelines where it's CMS set in front of us, so we have to follow those too.
Can you tell me the acronym that CMS, or what, that one you were telling me about?
Yes, it's the Federal Center for Medicaid
Services?
Services, sure.
We need our acronym dictionary in front of us.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. And then this is just a quick, a chart to show the increase of our disability waiver case management cases. When I started tracking data in early 2015, we had right around 380 cases, and as of the end of August, we have 520 cases. So we've definitely seen growth within our waiver services case management. We greatly appreciate you authorized an additional case manager for our team in late 22. That person actually joined our team in mid 23, and we've definitely needed it throughout 24. So that just shows a brief snapshot of the growth within our waiver supports.
Quick question for you. Would you attribute the increase in caseload to the older generation?
We are all, primarily the majority of our cases are 65 and younger.
And younger,
Mm-hmm.
okay.
Yep, all the over 65 go to our LTC partners, our long-term care partners.
Okay.
Trish, quick question on that. If someone is receiving services from another county and then they move to Crow Wing County, does that case transfer to Crow Wing County, or does it stay in the county where it originated?
It's not an easy answer. There's excluded time services, so there's certain supports. So if an individual from another county came to Crow Wing and lived in a group home, that's excluded time, so that would remain with the county of origination. However, if they came into our county and were receiving some independent living supports or food supports or different things like that, that case would transfer. For an example, right now we're getting cases that are scheduled to transfer to us in November, and right now we have 8 transfer cases coming in. So we have a lot of people wanting to live in Crow Wing County.
So the growth that you're seeing is coming from existing residents who are now looking for services or looking for assistance, and then plus migration that is happening and moving in Crow Wing County as well. So
Correct.
We're seeing that's where some of that is driven versus the aging population as such that would be spiking some of our other areas, but not in particular this particular one.
Yep.
And these are areas that are supported either by the state or federal to help support some of these people. So as long as that support comes with it for us,
Yes, if the support was coming 100% to cover the cost of of the service that's being offered. So we're doing now, if you look at those numbers, from 2020, is that January of 2020 with 452 cases to August of '24 with 520, with the increase of staff of one person from 2020 through 2024 and an increase of over almost 100 cases in that period of time. And while there is probably funding that is covering the majority of this, the workload is not necessarily being fully covered
Right.
because of other things that are there.
Okay. Thank you.
And then, this one just shows a little bit, with disability case management, we are, I think, kind of fortunate is we do get to track our revenue. And we have, I would say there could be an increase in our revenue rates. They haven't been changed in many, many, many years. But we are able to bring in some decent-looking dollars for the work that our disability case managers do. So I just wanted to show a graph of the changes of revenue that we have brought in since 2019. So if you have any questions on that, that's too.
All right, stepping into some of our wait time. So as Tammy mentioned earlier, if you are a resident of Crow Wing County, and anybody that is a resident has a right to asking for or requesting a MnChoices assessment, you are supposed to be getting your assessment within 20 days of requesting it. The state, a year ago, that 20 days didn't, it included weekends, so the 20 days went pretty quickly. They did make a change so that weekends and holidays aren't included in that, so it's 20 business days now. Crow Wing County, since the month of May 24, has been sitting between 45 and 60 days waiting for an assessment. We prioritized within those individuals that are waiting. If they're discharging from a hospital setting, they need services to maintain their health and safety, or worse things could happen. We're trying to meet those needs, definitely working with having a CBHH in our community. We want to make sure that those individuals are getting assessed when they need it. So we're really trying to prioritize within that wait list. A few other things we've tried to kind of help maintain this list. This summer we had 2 of our case aides on the disability team and our MnChoices team reclassified to a social worker. Those 2 positions are just actually getting, they both received their certificates in September, which is fantastic, so we can start to tap them a little bit within our assessment work, and they will do some of those more urgent ones, maybe once the team has received their caseload for the month and we need somebody to step in. That's when we're going to be utilizing those individuals. We've worked to rearrange some of the months. So if you look at the months of May and September and you came and talked to the MnChoices assessment team, you're going to feel their stress level, because those are historically months that our team is experiencing higher numbers of assessments. Obviously, there's months like February where that number is a little lower. With rearranging some of these assessments, we're trying to make the months a little bit more equitable so that the staff we kind of know how to plan for the month-to-month changes.
Could you go back to that, that one there? So are we not getting these done in that 20 days? I mean, according to that, we are behind.
Correct. We are behind.
Is there a penalty for that?
When it comes to the audit, we'll probably be dinged on that, but we've been very fortunate in Crow Wing County to not have, we've been able to meet that up until this year. Counties in the metro are sitting further out than we are. That's just the reality of MnChoices work right now. There's counties that are sitting more like 6 months. If we continue on the path we're at right now, we're likely to hit that as well. And the state is trying to take some steps in supporting the work and changing some timelines around to help navigate away from it. But right now we are not meeting the state requirements within the 20 days and people are waiting longer.
The result of that is there are people that are waiting for services that are not getting those services.
That is correct.
That you would maybe qualify, whatever that is that you qualify them for. Mm-hmm. They're waiting to get those services. So in that meantime, they're in kind of
They're in a
man's
limbo,
land.
yep. And we're trying our best to communicate that out to people that are calling and requesting assessments, so they are aware that it's gonna be a longer time than typical, or what we would like to see it. We're, again, within those priorities, like if we are having somebody that's in their home and desperately needing an assisted living setting or a 24/7 setting, we're gonna prioritize that differently than somebody that, maybe is looking for in-home supports. It's not a fun game to play when you're
But it
picking
wouldn't be-
over people's
It would be
needs.
really, it wouldn't be fun at all from my, just thinking about, no, I know you need it, but you're not gonna get it until we get to here.
Yeah, and I think that that is, another piece that our assessment team takes the brunt of. Once they finally do get that assessment, the individuals are frustrated. They're not receiving the time, the service and the time that they were expecting, or the time that maybe they personally needed it to happen. So our assessment team is really talking with the individuals and trying to explain that and trying to get services in place as quickly as we can once we have gotten that assessment completed. But it's definitely our consumers that are feeling the brunt of this, and our assessors that are trying to support them through it.
How long does it take typically to do this assessment that you're talking about? And then is it like, how many pages is it? Do you go out there with something like this and then you just go through the assessment is on a worksheet, or is it on an iPad, or how long does it take?
It's a computer-based program. So the Revised MnChoices is the assessment tool that we use. If you asked every single question within the assessment, I want to say we actually counted it. It's between 800 and 900 questions. If you printed it out, it'd be a lot of pages. There's plenty of drop downs. If you answer one question, then you get additional ones. If you look at the assessment interview time, an assessment interview can take anywhere from 1 to 4 hours.
Wow.
When you're doing the paperwork that goes along with it, we say a case usually can be processed between 8 hours and 16 hours. That's a really big gamut of case time, but with the new system, it is taking more of that 16 hours. And the reassessments that already have data and are on services obviously go a little bit quicker than somebody that needs a brand new assessment. So I would say a good solid average number would be 12 hours per case. We look to our assessment team to complete at least 10 assessments per month. Our reassessors complete 15, and that's obviously taking into account, that they're going to meetings, that they have other responsibilities within their workload as well. But the last kind of bullet point on this is that we are tapping other areas when we are just facing a September or a May. We're looking to our disability case managers to help pick up some reassessments. We did in 2001, I'm really testing myself, we did move our reassessments away from case management, so they weren't responsible for doing that anymore. We've seen the revenue benefits from doing so. So when we have to go backwards a little bit and tap our disability partners, it's not ideal, but that's how we're meeting the need right now.
That occurred in 2021.
2021, thank you. All right, going to the next slide. That wait time, so I pulled some numbers as of January 29th. So when we're looking at our wait list, I usually assign out the next month around the last part of the current month. So in July, I assigned out, I went in and there was 45 individuals on our wait list on July 29th. After we were assigning out those individuals, there was 22 left, and those dated back to 6/26. So you can kind of see that the timeline is much longer during the summer months. We've made progress. So as of September 6th, we had 35 individuals on the wait list. We've moved from that 45. So slowly but surely, these little changes that we're trying to implement are helping. But we're definitely trying to be very cognizant of it and working with our consumers so that they're aware of where we're at too.
And so as these are coming, as you're going through these months, some are coming offline, some are coming online, and they're still over that 20 days.
Right. Yep. I would say that a majority of the ones that are counted in, well, all the ones in this number are initial assessments. So this isn't looking at any of our reassessments. We're meeting those needs. Those are the priority. These are people that are coming in looking for service.
But their need is still there.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
So now we would take questions. I just wanted to say before we do that, though, thank you guys for talking to the board about this today. We really wanted to just make sure you were aware, and as you are hearing from citizens and constituents, and just being really familiar with this, so that you know if you are getting a call. We'd also welcome you to give us a call if you're hearing from somebody and they're, upset about this wait time. Like we said, we gave the team permission, last spring to say, we know we're going over that 20 days. And this summer when we had some conversations with them, they talked about how difficult it is, though, now to come into these situations when we are running late and we're running behind. And, they're the ones that have to, tell the individuals why they had to wait. And like the team said, we're trying to do a lot of different things creatively to address this. We're also working legislatively. It was passed last year to allow an initial assessment is only good for 60 days. Now, starting next August, so I don't know why it's taken so long, but next August, the assessment will actually be good for 365 days, which would be very helpful because sometimes not all the things are in place to help a person. Maybe they're not out of the CBHH yet, so their assessment will be good for more than 60 days. Or maybe if they're going to go into long-term care, maybe some of their assets haven't been spent down, so they're not eligible. So this assessment that they get initially, unless there's any significant changes, would be good for 365 days. The other thing that I know that we've been working on at MAXA, you may hear about it at AMC, is that we are trying, so as we said to you, we're trying to prioritize those people that are currently on waivered services so they don't fall off. We are asking the state to consider letting individuals have a choice about whether or not they need to have to have a reassessment every year. If there hasn't been any significant changes, could they waive that? And that would allow for their services to continue unless there's been any significant changes, which they would call if there were. We would be notified, and then we'd go out and do a new assessment. So we are asking for that to just give the initial assessments, those people that are needing to get onto services, priority. Other questions?
So, Mr. Chair, I don't have a question, but to your point, we were at the AMC Fall Conference last week, and in general government, this was a hot topic that was discussed, and the problems across the state that all the agencies are experiencing. And so it's not a small problem that exists out there, and DHS is not a good partner in trying to help solve it, even though it'll take both parties to get it resolved, but it's the clients that are suffering out there. So it's recognized, and I want you to know that we will be working hard on that.
Thank you.
Anything else from the board? Thank you for your presentation.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for the work you guys do.
Yes.
That's a frustrating job.
Yeah, okay. We should get 3, 4.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Before you today for a request from the Land Service Department for change in the fleet policy for the forestry vehicles and equipment. This pertains to Section 3, Item H, Vehicle Classification. Currently, Land Services falls underneath the non-emergency response vehicles in the policy. They're wanting to make a change and move over to off-highway use vehicle and equipment. What this would affect would be 2 of their forestry vehicles, to change that from a 10-year, 175,000-mile policy to a 7-year, 100,000-mile policy change. The all-terrain vehicles, ATVs, this would affect 3 of them, move them from a 10-year or mechanical issues to a 5-year dependent on mechanical. And then there'd be one off-highway vehicle, side-by-side, move that to a 7-year or dependent on mechanical. That currently falls underneath the ATV, the 10-year or dependent on mechanical. And then there's 3 snowmobiles, that moves from 10 years or dependent on mechanical to a 5-year dependent on mechanical. Some of the reasonings for this change, these changes are due to the nature and location of the forest management and recreation work that they do. Try to help with the overall CIP planning. The forestry work often involves the use of vehicles in extreme environments. Just the condition of the vehicles, from what we've seen in the past, some of these vehicles get beat up pretty good. They get wore out going on these off-roads. There's some stuff that wears out a little faster in these types of vehicles. So they're wanting to make a move to the replacement policy to move it up from a 10-year to a 7- and 5-year on these pieces of equipment.
For the ones we have right now, Joe, will that put all of those vehicles into a replacement mode to come up on a CIP?
Yes. Yeah, we currently have them set up on the CIP list already.
I mean, are you looking at replacing those now?
We have 2 that have been moved up to 2025 right now. Yes.
Okay.
Yep, and those are 3-year-old
How many more
vehicles.
will move up if this change is made?
What's that, Commissioner?
How many more will move up if this change is made?
But it pertains to these 2.
Okay, just those 2.
Those 2 vehicles, yep. The rest of theirs stay on the 10-year or 175 replacement policy. It's just affecting these 2 particular vehicles that they have for forestry.
Okay. But we didn't thinking maybe it was going to be a whole new fleet coming out there.
Nope. Nope. It's just for the forestry vehicles
Yep.
and equipment, yes.
Yeah, and to quote former Administrator Houle, we're planning our work and working our plan, and we're here today to more closely follow what we've historically been doing so we can plan our work better and achieve our goals.
Yeah, the Land Services made some changes over the years that
Yep.
has upped their rotation, I think, that due to what they do out in the field now. They've changed quite a few things, so.
Yeah, I don't have any real questions on anything
Nope.
for it, but thank you for bringing it to our attention.
So would this then be on consent? For the
Consent
next-
agenda on the
consent agenda
board?
for the next board meeting? You're all comfortable with that?
Yep.
Okay, perfect. Thank
I don't know
you.
if Paul is back there. Yes, Paul?
I can read the tea leaves. It's all
Okay,
good.
you read the tea leaves up here? Okay.
Read the tea leaves.
Thank you.
Thank you for your time, Commissioners.
You're welcome. Thank you. Anything else for